At 9:50 in the evening, her automated carport secured itself. Since then, not a single verified sighting of Nancy Guthrie exists on file. Without any farewell gestures or parting rings, a motorized entryway simply shut during a peaceful weekend evening up in the Catalina Heights just above Tucson, Arizona, followed by total silence. 47 consecutive days of zero answers. Dwell on that figure briefly. 47 days, not 47 hours or 47 minutes. It has been 47 entire days since an 84-year-old lady stepped inside her residence and vanished completely. 47 full days have passed with her cardiac pills resting undisturbed on the cooking island. 47 days ago, investigators located her listening devices left behind indoors, yet she remained nowhere to be found. Consider the massive resources mobilized over these 47 days trying to locate her. Authorities have combed through more than 40,000 civilian leads. Analysts scrutinized over 10,000 hours of security tape, checking every single second. You can observe the Phoenix Division of the Federal Bureau of Investigation canvassing the area. Border Patrol agents were mobilized along the southern boundary. Expert tracking squads deployed straight into the arid wilderness to hunt. Ancestral DNA specialists joined the effort. A national coalition is currently running operations directly from a designated government facility. Scores of investigators and federal officers are grinding 24/7. Yet no perpetrators are listed. No focal subjects have been officially announced. Absolutely nobody is behind bars. So here is where the investigation stands. Furthermore, today's broadcast centers entirely on a pair of crucial inquiries. You will find both queries right in our headline, and we plan to address each one today using hard evidence, official records, and a firmly corroborated sequence of events. Here is the initial inquiry. Has the search hit a wall because the individual who abducted Nancy Guthrie operated with flawless, meticulous precision, or is the entire inquiry fundamentally flawed from within? Moving to our next central inquiry, what do the verifiable official files truly reveal regarding the individuals constantly mentioned throughout this massive probe? Tomaso Chioni, Annie Guthrie, Dominic Evans. Forget the wild chatter in the message boards. Ignore the rumors from nameless tipsters. Focus instead on what law enforcement has definitively proven, what scientific specialists have concretely evaluated, and what the actual paperwork proves beyond doubt. The reality is that the majority of creators discussing this mystery are hiding a vital detail from their audience. These two major inquiries intertwine perfectly. Moreover, resolving the initial puzzle might dictate if the subsequent mystery ever sees a resolution. On March 10th, 2026, the Arizona Republic released an in-depth journalistic piece. That article completely bypassed the security clips of the perpetrator. It ignored the extortion letters entirely. It completely avoided discussing the genetic profiling still stuck in testing facilities, shining a spotlight instead on the official directing the manhunt, the leader deciding where physical proof gets shipped, determining which agencies can assist with the manhunt, and dictating what narrative the community hears whenever a press conference happens. The man in question is Chris Nanos, the top lawman in Pima County. Furthermore, the official history unearthed by the Arizona Republic prompts a very pointed query, rather than mere speculation. An inquiry rooted entirely in solid evidence, questioning if the tactical choices during this manhunt showcase the sheer strain of a near unsolvable mystery, or rather a habitual routine established well before Nancy Guthrie was ever officially registered as a vanished individual. That represents a single angle. However, another parallel narrative weaves through this entire situation right now, a storyline sparking greater internet gossip, heavier informational chaos, and deeper tangible damages to uninvolved individuals than practically any other element here. Tomaso Chioni happens to be Nancy's son-in-law. The man transported her back to her residence the evening she vanished, thus making him the final individual verified to have laid eyes on her. He remains totally silent to the press regarding the situation. Annie Guthrie is the missing woman's child and happens to be married to Tomaso. Authorities kept her vehicle locked up at an impound lot for several weeks. Dominic Evans is a 48-year-old guy who previously shared a musical group with Tomaso for a long time. Once federal agents published a clip showing a disguised figure on Nancy's porch, mobs clustered in front of Evans's property. His relatives hid indoors in total darkness. He chatted with detectives for roughly 40 minutes and hasn't heard a single word from authorities afterward. Pima County's law enforcement division declared that every brother, sister, and marital partner is fully exonerated. 0 perpetrators are identified. These stand as the official, proven realities. Our deep dive will track these truths to their absolute end. If you've tracked this tragedy since the beginning, keep watching, as our upcoming hour reveals details that mainstream media completely overlooked. For the newcomers watching our content, this is your cue to hit that subscribe button. We break down mysteries using official paperwork and corroborated schedules, avoiding wild guesses. This unique approach is significantly more crucial for this specific mystery than virtually any prior topic we've analyzed. Leave a reply below immediately. What is your current location, and what is the local time we are buckling in for a lengthy discussion? Welcome to the search for Nancy Guthrie. Here is the absolute current reality of the situation. Long before the national unit formed, prior to the 40,000 leads coming in, listen. Long before federal transport vans idled beside a peaceful desert residence in the Catalina Highlands, a resilient lady existed who endured tragedies that destroy average folks. Yet she emerged unbroken. Nancy Ellen Long Guthrie is her full name. She arrived in the world on January 27th, 1942, hailing from Fort Wright, Kentucky, a tiny municipality positioned right over the Ohio River bordering Cincinnati. Her childhood was deeply anchored in religion and kinship. During her collegiate years at the University of Kentucky, she served as a lifestyle columnist for the student publication, The Kentucky Colonel. She embodied reliability. Always pitching in and remaining dedicated, Nancy wed Charles Errol Guthrie on December 28, 1963. He worked as an excavation specialist, a profession notorious for relocating households worldwide with 0 notice. His employment dragged the household all the way to Melbourne, Australia, which happens to be the birthplace of their youngest girl, Savannah. By the time Savannah turned 2 years of age, the household migrated back to America and permanently settled down within Tucson, Arizona. This all happened back in the early 1970s. For Nancy, that arid town transformed into her forever home, where she and Charles forged their entire existence together. The couple ultimately raised 3 kids. Cameron eventually dedicated 26 years flying F-16 jets for the Vermont Air National Guard. Alongside Annie, Savannah went on to host the Today Show on NBC, while her mother published poetry, crafted jewelry, and taught at the University of Arizona. But everything suddenly shattered once June 10th, 1988 finally arrived. A Mexican mining expedition unexpectedly claimed Charles Guthrie's life at age 49. Nancy had just turned 46. Meanwhile, 16-year-old Savannah was gearing up for her final year of high school. Nancy absolutely refused to give up during the ensuing months. Instead, she snagged a public relations job at the University of Arizona, making sure her girls could afford their college tuition there. For almost 20 years, she dedicated herself to that campus. She set up monthly live concerts to uplift hospital workers and sick patients. Plus, she managed an initiative guiding local teenagers into healthcare careers. She single-handedly kept her household afloat, doing all the heavy lifting behind the scenes without ever demanding a single drop of credit. Fast forward to February 2026, and this fiercely independent lady was enjoying a peaceful, solitary life up in the Catalina foothills. Nestled just north of Tucson, her quiet subdivision tightly hugs the bottom of the Santa Catalina mountain range, featuring broad, twisting streets. Desert scrub and cacti separate the sprawling housing plots. Once the sun dips down, the entire area gets incredibly pitch black. It is that intense, heavy darkness you only experience miles away from town, where the night sky completely lights up with stars. During a November 2025 conversation, Nancy called her neighborhood incredibly peaceful, noting how wonderfully relaxed and easygoing the lifestyle was. Laughing out loud, she admitted getting a huge kick out of watching the local javelinas casually stop by to snack on her garden. Entering 2026, the 84-year-old struggled to get around easily. She relied on hearing devices and needed to take cardiovascular pills every single day. Tuning into weekly Sunday worship broadcasts was an absolute must for her. Religion had anchored their household ever since the kids were little. Savannah even wrote once that they totally considered God the sixth member of their tight-knit crew. Catching that weekend service was never optional. It was a rigid, well-known routine. Then there is her son-in-law, Tomaso Chioni. Chioni is an Italian immigrant who teaches advanced placement biology at Basis Oro Valley in Tucson. He has successfully kept that teaching job for over 15 years. He tied the knot with Nancy's daughter, Annie. Later, on the night of Saturday, January 31st, 2026, the matriarch grabbed supper at their place. Nothing felt out of the ordinary about the family gathering. Tomaso subsequently drove her back to her foothills property, pulling up right around 9:30 at night. Watching her climb out of the passenger seat and walk toward her entryway marks the absolute final time anybody officially laid eyes on her. To this day, Tomaso has kept completely quiet about the investigation. By the very next morning, the grandmother completely missed her regular virtual mass. A fellow parishioner from St. Andrew's Presbyterian quickly spotted her absence and immediately reached out to alert her anxious relatives. Family members rushed over to scour the grounds, but she was completely gone. By 12 o'clock, they desperately dialed 911. Responding Pima County deputies noted a truly chilling scene upon arrival. Her smartphone and billfold were left indoors, while her vehicle sat untouched right outside. Her crucial cardiovascular pills remained entirely undisturbed on the kitchen island, exactly where she left them. Furthermore, her listening devices were abandoned right near the front doorway. Forensic experts later matched scattered biological evidence directly back to her. On top of that, somebody had forcefully ripped her security camera off the wall. The next afternoon, Sheriff Nanos faced the media and delivered a blunt truth. He flatly stated that she definitely did not walk away willingly. Her mind was perfectly sharp, yet her aging body had been failing her for quite some time. Everything detectives uncovered indoors absolutely solidified his claim that they were handling a massive crime scene. Here was an 84-year-old survivor who beat widowhood at 46, single-handedly parented 3 kids, successfully launched an entirely new profession, and resided peacefully in her beloved arid landscape just gone. Clearly, somebody orchestrated the whole thing. The perpetrator intentionally blocked the porch lens before ever tearing it down, a tiny detail the public usually overlooks. Right before dismantling the hardware outside Nancy's entryway, the prowler purposefully draped branches across the glass. Smashing leaves over the view felt incredibly calculated and rehearsed. From there, retired federal profiler Jim Clemente noted that an even more disturbing sequence suddenly unfolded on the tape. The shadowed figure seemed to subtly motion toward the side, silently communicating with an unseen accomplice hiding just outside the viewing angle. This specific moment transforms the situation from a standard runaway inquiry into a highly organized, sinister abduction, exactly 9 days after she vanished. On February 10th, 2026, the Phoenix Federal Bureau released their shocking findings. They dropped an incredible clip recovered directly from that stolen doorbell camera. The actual gadget was completely missing. Authorities managed to scrape leftover cloud storage from her network, piecing together broken video files just enough to see what happened. These hidden clips revealed a disguised stranger lurking on her welcome mat during the pre-dawn hours of February 1st, 2026. Fully geared up and totally motionless, the suspect carried the rigid posture of a seasoned pro who had done this before. Federal Bureau Director Patel openly referred to the trespasser as a weaponized intruder who clearly messed with the recording equipment. Check out the official federal description of the suspect. They recorded an average-built male, standing roughly 5'9" to 5'10" tall. He wore a winter coat, ski mask, and work gloves, hauling a black 25-liter Ozark Trail hiking bag, the exact brand, sold only at Walmart. A combat-style pouch resembling a gun rig hung from his belt, and a distinct radio-like gadget poked right out of his coat pocket. Detectives refused to publicly name this handheld tool, though independent digital experts claim it perfectly resembles a cell signal jammer used to block security networks. Makes you wonder, right? Imagine sitting in a government screening room staring at this tape. You watch some guy purposefully blind a sensor before violently ripping it loose. You catch him signaling to an unseen partner nearby, all while packing a heavy-duty communication tool right in his gear. Then you realize a neighbor's security camera, the one pointed right at NY's place, suspiciously cut out that exact evening, even though the lenses on the opposite side of the residence kept capturing everything without a glitch. Only that specific angle, only on that particular evening. How much calculation does that level of readiness actually show you? After analyzing the videotape, retired FBI Supervisory Special Agent Michael Basiello came to a very distinct conclusion. He mentioned to journalist Paul Sperry how a motion caught on tape heavily implied there was an accomplice standing just out of frame. He pointed out that taking an 84-year-old lady with restricted movement out of a house definitely needed extra hands. He figured a duo working perfectly in sync. This wasn't some random grab. It was meticulously mapped out over several trips. Detectives digging through the security timeline started zeroing in on two specific days, January 11th, 2026, and January 24th. They were both Saturdays, landing just weeks before the evening Nancy vanished. Police insiders chatting with News Nation and reporter Brian Enton verified that officers knocked on doors around NY's neighborhood, asking locals to check their personal security cameras for those exact days. The trend developing from those tape checks heavily hinted at earlier trips to NY's house. The Bureau was piecing together a chronological map stretching back weeks prior to February 1st. 4 major broadcasting channels, ABC, CBS, NBC, alongside CNN, all independently confirmed through separate police contacts that the disguised figure showed up at NY's front porch several times leading up to her abduction. The Pima County Sheriff's Office issued a formal press release waving off those news stories as nothing but pure guesswork. Authorities never officially backed it up, yet 4 big channels and 4 separate contacts all painted the exact same picture. Right about here is where the verified facts drastically split from internet gossip. And keeping those two straight is absolutely crucial in an investigation like this one. The moment the Bureau dropped that suspect clip, a specific identity blew up all over the internet in a matter of hours. Dominic Evans, a drum player and 48-year-old grade school educator residing up in the Morirana neighborhood just north of Tucson. He helped start a music group named Early Black in 2007 alongside Tomaso Chioni and guitar player Walter Gonalves. Those two spent almost 20 years jamming together. Internet sleuths zeroed in on his frame, his dark mustache and goatee combo, calling out striking resemblances between his general appearance and the disguised guy caught on the federal tape. Retired Bureau behavioral analyst Jim Clemente pointed out to the press that a possible ink mark on the suspect's right wrist might just be the smoking gun for identification. While armchair detectives eagerly matched that visual against Evans, here is what the actual evidence firmly proves on paper. Dominic Evans sat down and chatted with detectives from the Bureau as well as the Pima County Sheriff's Office for roughly 40 minutes. He maintained that he was kicking back at home alongside his family the whole evening Nancy went missing. Cops haven't reached back out to him since that single conversation. The Pima County Sheriff's Office went on the record verifying that every sibling and spouse tied to the Guthrie household is totally cleared. Authorities haven't officially tagged anyone as a suspect or even a person of interest. Meanwhile, Evans gets stuck with crowds swarming his front yard after dark. His wife, Andrea Evans, an educational administrator, shared with the New York Times how they huddled indoors with the lights completely out, warning their teenage boy to stay away, calling him absolutely terrified and completely shell-shocked. Evans put it pretty bluntly. Somebody dragged his reputation into this mess, and totally innocent folks were paying the price. So that wraps up the cold, hard facts regarding Dominic Evans. Next up is Tomaso Chioni, who happens to be the final confirmed guy to lay eyes on Nancy. He stayed pretty tight-lipped publicly about the whole ordeal. Aside from a brief moment caught on video, noticing folks recording his place in mid-March 2026, police completely ruled him out as a suspect, while his wife, Annie, cleared a lie detector test. Folks tight with the family say Savannah Guthrie is absolutely fed up with all the wild internet rumors targeting her brother-in-law. Yet detectives kept digging into those crucial weeks leading right up to February 1st, still picking apart January 11th. still combing through January 24th, working their way backward from a garage door, shutting firmly at 9:50 p.m. on a weekend evening. Plus, the shadowy figure who blocked that lens with foliage before yanking it entirely had clearly scoped out the spot beforehand, way before any cop tapped on a neighbor's front door, before any clues got tossed in an evidence bag, and before a federal squad set up shop in Tucson to scrub through 10,000 hours of tape. Somebody had to run the show. That guy calling the shots was Chris Nanos. And to really grasp every single move he pulled during the initial 72 hours of the Nancy Guthrie case, every judgment call on which forensics team handles the DNA, what agencies get looped in, or what narrative hits the morning news cycle. You can't just rewind to last year or the previous voting cycle. You genuinely have to wind the clock back 50 years, right back to a police precinct out in El Paso, Texas, where a 20-year-old rookie strolled into that precinct back in February 1976, kicking off one of the wildest policing careers across the entire American Southwest. Because here is the raw truth that the mainstream media circus totally leaves out about this whole situation. Chris Nanos wasn't always the lightning rod for public outrage that he is today. Starting out, he was an entirely different breed of cop. Down in El Paso, Nanos rolled with the tactical unit playing the role of a street decoy. His whole gig revolved around intentionally sticking his neck out, wandering straight into sketchy neighborhoods where the pushers and hustlers roamed, and just waiting to get jumped. Getting jumped was just part of the gig. A 1982 El Paso newspaper feature painted him as a guy who tackled the grueling beat with a reckless bravery that turned plenty of heads. Then in 1979, he literally saved his partner's life during a crazy altercation that was intense enough to make the combined Law Enforcement Association of Texas sit up and pay attention. By 1980, that same organization crowned him the Western region's absolute best cop of the year, taking home first place on the department's boxing squad. He seemed destined for greatness. Early records paint a clear picture of an up-and-coming talent. Acknowledging those early achievements is crucial, primarily since the following events do not describe someone flawed right out of the gate. Instead, it details a steady decline that eventually completely derailed his entire professional trajectory. Back in March 1979, he received his first official write-up, losing a day's wages over arriving late. Just a minor slip-up. Law enforcement professionals routinely gather small dings on their files. However, by July of that exact year, a much heavier issue surfaced, getting suspended twice within 1 week. First, discharging his weapon. Next, placing bets while off the clock. A pair of completely unrelated events happening just 7 days apart. Fast forward to May 1980, and he gets handed a 10-day suspension. He broke protocol so badly that they yanked 10 whole shifts of his income. While department files gloss over the exact details of that major breach, his constant late arrivals never stopped piling up. Formal complaints start rolling in over shirking his responsibilities, intimidating people, and inappropriately blasting his patrol vehicle's siren against protocol. Spending a half-dozen years working for El Paso law enforcement, Chris Nanos racked up 26 distinct complaints on his permanent personnel jacket. Management forced him to take a grand total of 37 days off the clock without receiving a dime. Brass officially labeled his behavior as an ongoing habit of poor performance. And then came the month of March 1982. A man suspected of theft, Carlos Urias, slapped Nanos with an official grievance claiming severe officer brutality. Based on El Paso department files analyzed by the Arizona Republic, Urias claimed Nanos beat him so severely while being detained that he ended up on life support at a nearby medical facility. Nanos caught a 15-day ban from duty, marking the absolute harshest punishment found inside his personnel file. Prosecutors couldn't get an indictment out of a grand jury regarding the beating, yet that 15-day punishment remained stuck to his permanent, time-stamped employment history. Next came a massive argument regarding what simply looks like administrative red tape surrounding fake vehicle tags. He felt grabbing those tags fell completely outside his job description. Leadership saw it differently, and that clash proved to be the last straw. Arriving at August 1982, leadership presented Nanos an ultimatum. Step down or get fired? He quit. For decades, His widely circulated resume claimed his time-shielding El Paso streets wrapped up in 1984. Actually, he left in 1982. That missing 2-year stretch mysteriously vanished right before he landed a jail guard gig down in Pima County. His application paperwork further claimed a promotion to detective back in Texas. Yet the Arizona Republic literally couldn't dig up a single document backing that up. He even wrote down that he scored his captain's stripes over at Pima County during 2009. It actually hit in 2007. On March 10, 2026, the Arizona Republic released their findings, reached via email prior to the story dropping. Nanos completely dodged questions regarding his track record. He also ignored inquiries about quitting. The complete written reply he shot back literally just said, "That is your incredibly pressing issue. Are you positive you shouldn't investigate my teenage years to find out why the principal paddled me? Have fun writing your trashy smear campaign?" 24 hours later, the Pima County Sheriff's Office quietly scrubbed and revised his public web profile. Their media rep released an official memo, brushing off the fake details as simple clerical mistakes, claiming nobody purposefully tried faking his career timeline. That PR statement completely ignored his disciplinary history. It also conveniently skipped over claims that he quit just to avoid getting canned. They fixed the timelines and shut their mouths entirely. Just prior to the Arizona Republic dropping their piece, a hometown news crew grilled Nanos regarding his career back in December 2025, and footage proves he lied straight to their faces. The dates here are absolutely crucial. This wasn't some ancient paperwork glitch forgotten by lazy bureaucrats. He purposefully lied on camera just a few months before Nancy Guthrie completely vanished. Let's not forget what Nanos blurted out during his second media briefing on February 3rd, 2026. That happened barely 2 days into his biggest case ever. Swarmed by heavy-hitting journalists from across the country down in Tucson, he stared them dead in the eyes and delivered this specific line. He openly complained about not being accustomed to people dissecting his every sentence and actually forcing him to answer for his own claims. That came straight from the boss, spearheading the search for an 84-year-old missing grandmother. A guy leading a team that literally just swept the initial crime scene, discovered DNA right where the intruder broke in, and kicked off a grueling 47-day manhunt, resulting in 0 handcuffs. He genuinely disliked being questioned. That represents the verified baggage carried by the officer knocking on Nancy Guthrie's front porch on February 1st, 2026. Zero speculation here. It's a rock-solid timeline constructed entirely using internal files, official hiring documents, time-stamped penalties, plus his literal on-screen quotes. Furthermore, this disturbing pattern didn't suddenly kick off in 2026. It all started down in El Paso back in 1979, building up slowly. However, reading through those write-ups completely misses one giant piece of the puzzle. Paperwork absolutely fails to justify why someone dedicating 40-plus years to reinventing themselves following a disastrous early run would harbor such deep-seated resentment and openly broadcasted, intensely bitter hatred aimed squarely at the exact federal task force currently helping his guys track down Nancy Guthrie. This beef ties back to a specific day and a specific person. Honestly, it might just be the biggest smoking gun hiding behind this whole mystery. Hidden within this investigation exists a crazy detail that everyone tuning into those media briefings completely missed out on. You won't catch these things on tape. They unfold quietly within the gaps separating agencies. It lives within the quiet standoff separating local law enforcement securing an area and federal authorities demanding entry. Making sense of this quiet tension requires looking 11 years into the past, bypassing vanished individuals entirely for a coffee shop. Back in July 2015, Chris Nanos secured the top spot at the Pima County Sheriff's Office without a public vote. Local supervisors handed him the badge to finish out Clarence Dupnick's remaining time. Having served the force since 1984, he paid his dues rising through the jail system. Street beats, internal reviews, national defense, and detective work for 30 years. Ultimately, he secured the throne. Barely a few months into his new command, federal agents launched an inquiry examining his agency. Digging through the paperwork, detectives uncovered a questionable money trail stretching all the way back to early 2011. Confiscated cash, taken from suspects during active busts and legally earmarked strictly for police work, was quietly shifted around in massive chunks. Agents proved that nearly $500,000 vanished over a 5-year stretch, paying for things completely unrelated to stopping illegal activity. Their primary target became an account supposedly reserved entirely for the precinct's unpaid backup deputies. A simple diner broke things wide open. The second-in-command's relative snagged control of the precinct's internal eatery back in 2012, operating without formal agreements, licensing, or monthly leases. Official police cash wound up covering all the gear outfitting that location, including personalized displays for daily specials and professional cooking renovations exceeding $20,000. When first pressed about these massive costs, Brass claimed they utilized racketeering seizures. Eventually, they completely reversed course, insisting the cash actually flowed from standard municipal budgets. Excuses changed, but the paper trail remained solid. By October 2016, Nanos' right-hand man faced 7 serious federal indictments, ranging from organized cash-washing schemes to outright stealing government subsidies. Prosecutors argued the deputy alongside his crew intentionally fed lies to the Pima County legal team while pushing through budget approvals. The accused stepped down instantly, eventually taking an agreement by admitting guilt on 3 minor charges for swiping public assets. Meanwhile, Chris Nanos escaped without formal accusations or indictments. Speaking to the Arizona Daily Star, he insisted a federal investigator personally assured him that he remained totally off the hook. Because federal agents strictly refused to acknowledge ongoing or past probes, nobody could ever actually prove whether his confident statement held water. However, one fact stands solid. From February 2015 through January 2016, Nanos personally signed off moving almost $220,000 into that highly scrutinized auxiliary account. You can find his signature right on the paperwork. Even though prosecutors ignored it, the official record clearly proves his direct involvement. Voters ousted him during the 2016 cycle. Insiders confirmed that the looming federal scrutiny basically destroyed any legitimate shot at securing another term. Stripped of power, he wasted years sidelined, forced to observe another guy managing the very precinct he devoted 30 years trying to conquer. When he miraculously reclaimed victory in December 2024 by a mere 481 ballots, a historically razor-thin margin, he brought all that old baggage back inside. Richard Castigar, an ex-commander operating directly beneath him, didn't sugarcoat things while speaking with the Daily Mail. The veteran officer claimed the boss absolutely despises federal agents, harboring massive resentment, stemming right back to that 2015 probe. Furthermore, he dropped a bombshell linking past grievances directly with current events, moving far beyond mere gossip or unverified theories. He stated explicitly that every single clue involving Nancy Guthrie belonged at the main federal crime lab from day one. Keep in mind, this isn't some talking head on television. This guy worked inside the building, witnessing the sheriff's exact leadership style firsthand. The top cop's televised reaction back during the 2015 inquiry reveals his mindset under fire. Appearing on local Tucson channel KGUN9, he labeled the federal probe complete garbage while expressing profound outrage. He openly dared federal authorities to step forward and confess their entire operation lacked any real merit. It stands as absolute proof, showing exactly how Chris acts whenever the feds start poking around his personal empire. Now we jump to February 2026. An 84-year-old lady vanishes without a trace out in the Catalina foothills. Phoenix-based federal agents are deployed, bringing massive national assets directly into play. America's premier scientific testing center, the legendary federal compound situated out in Quantico, Virginia, stands totally ready, boasting highly specialized, lightning-fast procedures crafted exclusively for tracking down abducted citizens. Yet, the crucial DNA cocktail discovered inside Guthrie's residence, the exact material potentially holding the killer's identity, gets boxed up and mailed off to an independent commercial facility down in Florida. As an ex-commander noted earlier, those items belonged with the top-tier federal scientists right out of the gate. Instead, the very guy who previously trashed the Bureau's integrity decided to pivot entirely in another direction. Ultimately, that single, verifiable, incredibly weighty choice represents the exact moment everything about this hunt starts falling completely apart. As the sun rose on February 1st, 2026, a Pima County patrolman rolled onto a dead-silent suburban block up in the Catalina foothills. High-altitude mornings out there bring a deep chill, dropping the kind of freezing frost that sinks right into your joints after nightfall traps the freezing mountain winds. Exiting his cruiser, the officer walks toward the main entrance. Standing precisely on the doorstep belonging to an 84-year-old resident, he spots something absolutely chilling that freezes his blood. Science later proved those organic remnants smeared across the front pathway belonged exclusively to Nancy Guthrie herself. That exact threshold right there happens to be the single most crucial piece of forensic real estate in this whole probe. Every single clue this mystery hinges upon was gathered right at that very entryway and its immediate surroundings. The perpetrator's path, the areas they touched, and the DNA scattered during the frenzy of that pre-dawn attack. That porch held the key to solving this. Yet how it was handled afterward is something crime scene specialists are calling completely unheard of for such a massive investigation. Sheriff Chris Nanos showed up himself, later telling the press that he almost never goes out to disappearances in person, noting that he only boots up for the gravest emergencies. He actually sized things up perfectly right away. Blood and tissue right at the door. The security lens was literally ripped off the wall. Her cardiac pills were completely ignored, and her listening devices sat right there. He addressed the media crowd later that day and bluntly stated they were dealing with foul play, making it clear she didn't just wander off, and that the interior evidence proved a vicious, intentional attack went down. His initial read was spot on, but how they managed the site over the next several hours is where everything falls apart. They handed the house back over in less than 20 hours. They didn't even bother stringing up yellow police line around the yard. Nor did they post a guard at the door to track who was coming and going. Not a single cop was tasked with writing down the details of people stepping inside. The most vital crime scene in all of Arizona was just left wide open. What happened next was a parade of foot traffic that veteran coroner Joe Scott Morgan eventually slammed on air as an absolute failure of basic police work. On February 13th, 2026, 12 days into the search for Nancy, and while federal agents were still working the site, a random pool service van rolled right up. Ambiance Pool Service and Supplies, a business that had literally never been to that house before. Nancy wasn't even one of their customers. News drones hovering just outside the property line managed to catch the whole bizarre thing on video. The footage shows guys hauling gear out while a Pima County deputy stands right next to them, walking them straight into the rear garden. You can see the crew cleaning the water and dragging their tools around the patio, all while the feds were actively doing their thing indoors. During that exact same week, a bunch of yard workers showed up with their mowers. A traveling nurse just walked right in. Takeout orders were dropped off at the door. Journalists from huge broadcast networks strolled right up to the porch to snap their own pictures. News crews were shooting the blood spots still sitting on the pavement well before the detectives even finished their sweeps. Then the social media influencers showed up. Folks living next door eventually mentioned that long after the area was supposedly locked down, there wasn't a steady police watch keeping randoms away. Just think about the sheer amount of junk all those folks left behind. Dead skin, random hairs, muddy footprints. Every single individual who walked up to that door, from the water tech to the news anchor, down to the gardener and the pizza guy, dropped their own DNA all over an area that detectives desperately needed to analyze perfectly. All that random civilian dirt was being stomped right into the attacker's actual evidence. Each stray footprint smeared the profile further, guaranteeing any defense attorney could tear it apart during a trial. Retired NYPD investigator Michael Alcazar straight up told CNN's Aaron Burnett that the area was totally trashed because of the massive crowd wandering through. He pointed out that the squad now had to sort through a massive pile of new genetic markers and shoe tracks, burying the real clues, making their jobs a nightmare. And that brutal takeaway was given just 9 days into the hunt, long before the pool guys and yard crews even did their damage. Joe Scott Morgan was way more critical. He called out the total lack of a checkpoint as a systemic breakdown, since nobody was sitting there jotting down who arrived and when. Any stranger who wandered onto that porch turned into a mystery element that the lab techs suddenly had to factor into their testing. Then there was the security lens attached to the top of her house, a piece of tech that literally nobody noticed during the first search. They only spotted it well after they had given the property back. They actually had to call in tech guys from Google to try and pull video files off the hardware. Sadly, all they managed to salvage were tiny preview shots triggered by movement in the rear garden, the patio, and the alleys. Those snaps just showed relatives and maintenance crews stopping by weeks before February 1st. Not a single shady thing was caught. Completely missing the actual evening, Nancy vanished. The absolute most critical time frame, the one specific moment that system had to be rolling. Blank. By February 12th, federal agents went back out there and set up a massive canopy right over the porch. An insider told CNN they actually put that thing up to simulate pitch-black lighting, faking the gloomy pre-dawn vibe from February 1st so techs could study fake outfits and bags, mimicking the killer's gear exactly as they would have looked during the ambush. They were trying to rebuild the attack on ground that had already been trampled to death by random cleaners and camera crews. Which brings us to the ultimate rule in police work. Locard's exchange principle, the bedrock standard of crime lab science created over 100 years back, guarantees one absolute truth. Touching anything always leaves a mark. Anybody stepping into a room drops a piece of themselves and carries a piece of it out. This isn't just guesswork. It serves as the foundational rule for crime scene processing worldwide. For this particular location, the implication is crystal clear. Each unrecorded and unchecked footprint on those grounds threw another wrench into the biological puzzle that scientists are currently attempting to unravel at the lab. Lawyers for the accused aren't required to show their client was absent. Their job is simply demonstrating the evidence is unreliable since the paper trail fell apart before analysis even finished. Ultimately, this location handed any prospective legal team the exact ammunition required to tear that case wide open. Ex-prosecutor turned defense lawyer Jenny Hutt looked over the details on News Nation and boiled the entire mess down perfectly. She noted reports calling the location severely compromised, pointing out how that kind of mess will torpedo a trial well before opening arguments happen. Consequently, a $1.3 million lawsuit hit Sheriff Nanos, targeting how terribly he managed the inquiry. That front porch, harboring crucial genetic clues, represented the ultimate starting point for unraveling this entire mystery. Now, the lingering doubt hanging over a Florida facility rather than Quantico centers on whether sufficient clues survived the chaos that engulfed that porch over the ensuing days. Roughly 2 miles away from Nancy Guthrie's place, searchers conducting a sweep near an arid highway froze in their tracks. There in the dirt, deep in the stark landscape north of Tucson, sat a solitary black glove. Once detectives compared it against the Bureau's published images of a disguised suspect loitering on the victim's porch, the resemblance clicked instantly. Every detail of the handwear worn by that intruder, the design, shade, and shape perfectly mirrored the item abandoned out in the brush. A federal representative later verified this fact on the record, stating the discovered item looked virtually identical to what the suspect wore on the security footage. For a short window, the entire manhunt zeroed in exclusively on that specific item. 16 gloves altogether turned up across the nearby wasteland during the hunt, though search crew members had ironically tossed most of them aside while combing the area. However, this specific find was unique. It surfaced in a field roughly 2 miles out, completely cut off from the primary sweep zone. Federal agents shipped it out express on February 12th. It hit the testing center by February 13th, and initial genetic readouts dropped on February 14th. Technicians fed that signature into CODIS, the Bureau's national system holding genetic data for over 26 million people, mostly individuals currently serving time or convicted nationwide. 0 hits returned. The suspect behind that genetic trace was totally off the radar, prompting detectives to quickly pivot toward family tree analysis, a highly sophisticated technique that allows authorities to track down kin of an unidentified suspect, bypassing the need for a direct hit in the criminal registry. A few weeks down the line, News Nation verified the outcome. Those genetics belonged to a local food service worker operating nearby, possessing 0 ties to the crime or Nancy Guthrie. That massive clue capturing national attention, the silver bullet meant to blow the lid off the mystery, fizzled out entirely, leaving behind just one lone genetic signature. Detectives had a blended swab gathered from within the victim's residence, featuring genetics from multiple people tangled together, a fact Nanos freely shared with NBC News. Technicians warned him they were facing serious hurdles, largely because unraveling a blended genetic soup is drastically harder to parse out than a straightforward one-person sample. These hurdles worsened because the evidence trail at the collection site was already heavily corrupted long before the forensic sweep finished. That tangled swab wound up waiting at a private center in Deerfield Beach, Florida, called DNA Labs International. Here is the hard scientific consequence of that choice. Out in Quantico, Virginia, the Federal Bureau's lab team runs arguably the most state-of-the-art criminal testing complex anywhere on the globe. They maintain emergency workflows built purely for abductions. Additionally, the Orem Lab in the Woodlands, Texas, is a premier national hub for advanced genetic family tracing. Their experts are absolutely crucial for naming culprits across multiple highly publicized mysteries. They keep a fast-track connection straight to Quantico, built solely to speed up the transition from anonymous swab data into a living, breathing suspect. Othram co-founder Kristen Middleman evaluated the fallout publicly and summarized the mess with one simple word: devastating. She explained the Florida Center is an old-school facility that burns through physical material just to generate a basic genetic readout. She literally couldn't fathom why authorities skipped sending the swab to Quantico, especially since federal experts outpace everyone else and possess an instant pipeline for putting a name to the data. An inside police contact speaking to Reuters bluntly stated that the move seriously threatens to stall an investigation growing increasingly desperate by the second. Nanos claimed his official excuse boiled down to keeping things uniform, telling CBS News his squad utilized that Florida center for years and already housed relatives' genetics there, claiming that splitting clues between two labs just created extra red tape and avoidable conflicts. He laid it out: simply stick with one facility holding everything, generate the paperwork, share it, and keep grinding. However, the feds completely destroyed his version of events. A federal agent confirmed to News Nation that the Bureau expressly asked for the glove and the interior house swabs to be routed straight to Quantico for analysis. The sheriff shot that idea down. A Bureau insider told News Nation they actually had to beg for a seat at the table instead of being invited in from the jump. That same insider noted that no matter what data the Florida crew kicks back, federal techs will probably run the swabs a second time, burning precious daylight in a hunt where the clock is everything. The insider was incredibly blunt, labeling the sheriff's call purely idiotic and insane. Then came a bombshell conflict that nobody could brush under the rug as a simple office mix-up. Over that exact same day, during an identical news cycle spanning just 24 hours, the Bureau officially informed News Nation about a glove found within Nancy Guthrie's residence. Yet, that exact afternoon, Nanos went on Fox News and swore up and down they never pulled a glove from the house or located one anywhere on the property. Same investigation. The exact same clue had two massive agencies taking polar opposite angles, broadcasting completely conflicting stories to separate cameras right in the exact same town. Ex-Arizona Supreme Court Justice Andrew Gould saw both narratives unfold live on air and was extremely measured with his reaction while talking to Fox News. The top officer's blunders seriously hindered their ongoing probe, he claimed. An ex-judge from the state Supreme Court, they deliberately picked hindered a highly specific courtroom phrase rather than botched or messy. Strictly hindered. Next came another glaring inconsistency, dropping right during the most agonizing period for her relatives. At the start of February, Nanos openly informed journalists anyone could be guilty. He intentionally echoed that exact phrase. Textbook detective talk: explore every angle. Never rule anyone out early. 14 days later, on February 16th, he completely abandoned that original stance. Standing before reporters, he announced that every single Guthrie family member, siblings and spouses included, was totally off the hook. He then slammed the internet rumors targeting them as incredibly heartless. He branded the gossip disgraceful. Yet while making those public claims, his investigators kept running judge-approved sweeps through Annie and Tomaso's place, snapping pictures and seizing their personal belongings. Annie's vehicle sat parked inside an impound lot long after they officially proclaimed her innocence. The Pima County Sheriff's Department dropped well over $200,000 just having that Florida facility analyze clues. Testing on that blended DNA trace from inside Annie's house hasn't finished yet. Pushed about deadlines. Nanos warned media it might drag on for weeks, months, or beyond a timeline the facility blamed on testing complexities. They completely ignored the Quantico resources. A promising glove clue hit a dead end. Now, just one solitary specimen sits down in Florida. That might actually be the absolute last physical clue keeping this investigation alive. The real issue isn't if modern science can find the truth. Advanced family tree DNA tracking has successfully cracked mysteries way older than this one. It all comes down to whether that leftover material, especially after how terribly the original crime scene was handled, is still usable enough to run the tests. One specific figure actually existed way before Chris Nanos made a single call regarding Nancy Guthrie's disappearance. It's a statistic completely unrelated to genetic testing, independent of any crime scenes, and separated from anyone who mysteriously vanished. This particular figure was generated directly inside the Pima County Sheriff's own department headquarters. It came from the very officers carrying out his raids, combing through evidence at his command, and patrolling in cruisers sporting his agency's logo day in and day out. That statistic is 98.8%. Back in January 2024, the Pima County Deputies Organization, the union backing the everyday street cops, held an official no-confidence ballot against Chris Nanos. 86 officers participated, and 85 declared they didn't trust him. The press release accompanying those survey results pulled absolutely no punches. They highlighted deep-seated anger over what the association labeled as terrible guidance and sheer incompetence by Sheriff Nanos, along with his top brass. That poll took place well over 12 months before Nancy Guthrie ever vanished. It wasn't some sudden backlash to his management of her tragedy. Honestly, it served as a brutal judgment of his character, delivered by his closest colleagues working right inside the exact same headquarters currently managing the Guthrie mystery. Then came November 2024 campaign season, bringing a crazy chain reaction leading to federal litigation. A stinging formal reprimand from county supervisors, and a winning gap so ridiculously tight it triggered an automatic statewide tally review. Nanos wanted another term. He faced off against Lieutenant Heather Lapin, a conservative candidate with a solid 20-year track record within his own agency. Just weeks out from voting, Nanos suddenly suspended her. He strictly confined her to her house during work hours and completely blocked her from publicly discussing why she was sidelined. His agency simultaneously slapped a total silence mandate on her. His personal lawyer even admitted this restriction was real, though Nanos flat-out denied it. Lapin's legal counsel, Steve Serbalik, didn't hold back with the media. He claimed he'd never seen a political rival literally mute their competition like that. He argued it completely violates the very foundation of American civil liberties. Meanwhile, Nanos also benched Sergeant Aaron Cross, the guy leading the police union, the exact group behind that massive 98.8% vote of no confidence. Someone snapped a picture of Cross on a sidewalk holding a poster protesting against Nanos. In response, Cross sued Nanos in federal court for trampling his free speech rights. Democratic County Supervisor Matt Hines brought forward a formal resolution to publicly condemn him, slamming the moves as a petty, partisan scheme designed to smear and muzzle his rival. Mark Napier, the conservative ex-sheriff who previously held the job, released a statement branding the stunt incredibly unethical and obviously driven by petty political revenge. After reviewing the demand for an inquiry, the Arizona Attorney General decided against launching one. Meanwhile, the formal reprimand died in committee thanks to standard party-line bickering. On November 5, 2024, Chris Nanos secured re-election by merely 495 ballots. That 0.1% gap legally forced an automatic recount. They finished retallying on November 27th at the Pima County Superior Court. The official difference: just 481 ballots out of the 487,031 total votes cast countywide. Lapin's statement following the certified recount results was incredibly sharp and direct. She confidently claimed that the sheriff suspending her actively swayed the race's results and unfairly dragged her professional reputation through the mud. She walked away from the force 12 months later. Meanwhile, Cross, the guy benched over that sidewalk protest picture, just bided his time and held his position. He simply observed. Then February 2026 rolled around. Look at how this case unfolded through the eyes of an agency where 98.8% of the street cops already admitted they totally distrusted their boss. Ex-FBI profiler Robin Drake analyzed the case on the record, pointing out a massive organizational flaw that's way worse than a simple technical mistake. Tati Bodie noted his theory that terrible trust rating likely fostered a toxic workplace, where the investigators running the Guthrie probe actually hide details from their own boss. He broke it down like this. When detectives realized their briefings to Nanos might get botched on Fox News the very next day, twisted out of context, revealed at terrible times, or totally clashing with whatever he told NBC 60 minutes prior. Protecting the case means strictly limiting intel moving up the chain. Because Nanos relies on partial details, his press statements end up completely inaccurate. Media outlets highlight those inconsistencies, burying the case in distractions, forcing the actual police work to bypass the boss completely instead of involving him. This entire dynamic, detectives pushing forward despite their boss, rather than being led by him, was solidified on March 13, 2026. When the Pima County Deputies Union held yet another no-confidence vote against Nanos. Recall leader Daniel Baudier called the outcome completely unanimous. Every participating officer agreed, not 98.8%, but exactly 100%. This dropped 12 days following the Arizona Republic's deep dive into his El Paso history, and roughly 6 weeks into an active disappearance that still hadn't yielded a single arrest. Just 24 hours before that secondary vote hit on March 12th, Republican congressional hopeful Gutierrez officially submitted the paperwork to initiate a recall against Nanos. Speaking to the New York Post, he claimed the sheriff's handling of the Nancy Guthrie situation brought total shame to both Tucson and Pima County. He explained that local officers actually wanted to initiate this process internally, yet feared severe retaliation from their boss if their names were attached to the documents. He noted the push was fully bipartisan, with Pima County Democrats and Republicans feeling exactly the same level of disgust. He planned to collect about 135,000 signatures across a 120-day window. Within mere days of filing, he already had 500 volunteers actively securing signatures. The sheriff fired back on March 17th, assuring Tucson's 13 News that citizens absolutely had this right and promising he would always respect whatever the public decided. He labeled it a perfect example of democracy in action. Yet despite the chaos, the lack of confidence, the official petitions, the briefings clashing with the FBI, and the massive doubts surrounding lab choices and compromised crime scenes, a single picture from this case blew up online faster than anything else. It was a snapshot showing Chris Nanos kicking back at an Arizona Wildcats hoops game, right as a federal unit ground away in some office across the city, and right as Savannah Guthrie filmed desperate pleas to whoever took her mom while her relatives agonized. He chose to watch sports. Meanwhile, at exactly 1:47 in the morning on February 1st, 2026, the front doorbell cam at Nancy Guthrie's place dropped offline. 25 minutes following that, at 2:12 in the morning, sensors picked up movement outside. 16 minutes later, at 2:28, an irreversible event occurred that detectives still cannot fix, justify, or bounce back from. The victim's heart monitor app lost connection with her cell. Her mobile device remained indoors, but the medical implant was gone. That 2:28 morning timestamp serves as the absolute best proof the authorities have for exactly when she was taken. It draws a hard digital boundary, separating the moment she was safe inside from the exact second she vanished. Every subsequent action, every mapped grid, every neighborhood video sweep, every chopper flight revolved completely around this solitary clue. 8 minutes following that, at 2:36 in the morning, a residential security lens over on Camino Real caught a car heading southbound across its field of view. Camino Real acts as a stealthy escape path, a twisting trail out of the Catalina foothills that completely avoids major traffic hubs, like East Skyline Drive or North Campbell Avenue, which regular commuters typically take to exit the area. Former Pima County Rescue Chief Bob Kager analyzed the clip and didn't mince words about the route's significance, emphasizing that nobody takes that street by mere coincidence. He insisted that choosing that path requires careful calculation. Meanwhile, property owners Elias and Danielle Strategulas informed Fox News Digital that cops totally ignored their street for 25 days following the abduction. Nobody knocked, no doorbell alerts popped up, and zero questions were asked, even though their property sits exactly 2.5 miles from the crime scene, just barely beyond the 2-mile search zone the cops mapped out. The couple's private recording, which logged 12 different rides passing between midnight and 6 in the morning on February 1st, counting that crucial 236 vehicle, rolling past merely 8 minutes after the heart monitor dropped offline, was completely missed by the authorities. The residents actually dug it up themselves after catching some local broadcasts 25 days deep into the hunt. Police capped their radius at 2 miles. Meanwhile, the absolute best time-stamped visual clue available to the public was resting just 2.5 miles away. No officers ever bothered checking. Shifting to the medical device, the victim had a Medtronic implant, a heart regulator kicking out a faint Bluetooth pulse to link with a smartphone app. Dropping that digital connection doesn't actually kill the signal. The hardware keeps pushing out a weak frequency until its battery dies. Assuming specialized gear gets close enough to pick it up, police insiders later admitted to CBS News that the task force strapped high-tech tracking equipment, basically a frequency catcher, onto a chopper cruising near the ground. That aircraft methodically swept the dry wastelands around her subdivision, hovering at a sluggish pace right above the dirt to hunt down that exact digital signature. Assuming the chest implant was pushing out even the weakest pulse, this hardware could drastically shrink the search zone. Unfortunately, the media blasted all the details about this tracking tech before the cops even finished scanning their designated maps. Former President Trump was actually in the middle of explaining this exact strategy during a rally, only stopping because his spokesperson, Caroline Leavitt, signaled his jet was waiting. His incomplete remarks had successfully exposed the tactic while the manhunt was ongoing. Consequently, whoever snatched her figured out through the news cycle that an aircraft could track her internal monitor. Nobody has caught that frequency again. That represents another massive missed opportunity in this case that can never be fixed. And we cannot ignore the international boundary. The city of Tucson lies merely 60 miles north of Mexico. Interstate 19 provides a direct southbound route straight down into the Nogales, Arizona crossing point. A chartered plane took off from Tucson International Airport heading toward Puerto Vallarta, Mexico, at 4:45 a.m. on February 1st. That was approximately 2 hours following her heart monitor's final transmission. Steve Pfizer, an expert in tracking down lost individuals, pointed out this suspicious schedule to the public. He felt confident federal agents already checked it out, though that flight time frame definitely warranted a closer look. Federal investigators remain totally silent regarding that particular airplane. However, the blatant lack of communication right at the international crossing is a matter of public record. Reliable insiders told Newsweek that both American and Mexican authorities received preliminary updates just to be completely safe. Officials south of the boundary claimed they found absolutely zero solid proof that anyone smuggled Nancy into their country. Yet, the second journalists questioned those leaders in Mexico about whether a standard request for international teamwork got submitted. The stories told by the United States and their southern neighbors completely contradicted each other. Soon after, civilian aid groups alongside the searching Mothers of Sonora requested formal permission to scour the harsh Arizona wastelands on foot. Cecilia Flores started that group after her 2 boys vanished in 2015 and 2019. They have successfully tracked down over 5,000 lost individuals throughout Mexico, navigating arid landscapes identical to the areas outside Tucson. They put in their formal request. However, county law enforcement rejected the paperwork, arguing that a civilian sweep might compromise the active case. Several volunteers traveled there regardless, handing out missing posters featuring Nancy's face around the outskirts. As they attempted to comb through the adjacent properties, local residents demanded they get out. Trespassing rules blocked their progress constantly, When CNN asked for a statement, the Pima County Sheriff's Department said this job requires actual experts. Meanwhile, the United Cajun Navy handed over a thorough 41-page strategy to law enforcement. Pima County deputies completely ignored their submission. Prior to Nancy vanishing, Sheriff Nanos transferred his unit's lone aviation rescue operator back to standard road shifts. That aviator begged Nanos face-to-face to reconsider. He flatly refused. Representatives from the Pima County Deputies Organization eventually told Fox News Digital they fought that transfer early on, knowing it dangerously crippled a vital emergency resource. So when Nancy vanished, local police lacked any designated air support aviators on standby. 3 missed opportunities: the physical perimeter getting cut off a half-mile too soon, the media finding out about the heart monitor mid-hunt, and their sole rescue aviator getting stripped of his wings long before February 1st rolled around. You simply cannot undo any of those mistakes. Right now, a constantly expanding pile of yellow blooms rests just outside Nancy Guthrie's entryway. Locals have spent weeks leaving them there. You will find hand-penned letters, weatherproofed against the dry breezes, and wedged into bouquets by folks who never even knew her. Fans who tuned into Savannah's broadcasts over the years ended up feeling a strange parasocial bond, truly believing they were close to her relatives. Bouquets continue piling up. The truth remains hidden. 47 days. That is exactly where the investigation sits today. On March 19th, 2026, 47 days since a garage shut tight at 9:50 p.m. during a weekend evening up in the Catalina foothills, and Nancy Guthrie's entire existence got ripped away by a culprit who organized the hit so flawlessly that they left 0 solid forensic clues for prosecutors to use in court. At least not right now. The total bounty offered for finding Nancy safely or locating her body currently hovers around $1.3 million. Her relatives put up $1 million. Federal authorities pledged $100,000, while 88 Crime, the secret hotline for Pima County, tossed in $12,000. You literally have $1.3 million waiting to be taken. Yet nobody has stepped up to collect a single penny. Former federal operative Steve Moore tackled this exact bizarre reality head-on. He explained that the logic behind nobody taking the payout is incredibly simple. The absolute only individuals who understand what occurred to Nancy Guthrie are the perpetrators. They have completely hidden those horrific details from the rest of the world. We are not dealing with a random bystander agonizing over calling the cops. Nor is there some shady friend tossing and turning over, driving the escape car. Moore concluded the perpetrator's inner group is completely locked down, coming from an expert with decades of federal detective work that carries immense weight. Basically, detectives cannot just sit back and hope a random phone call drops the golden clue right into their laps. It proves that sorting through 40,000 clues across 7 weeks completely failed to uncover a viable, independent eyewitness. The only path forward, the absolute foundation, is forensic science. Federal agents verified they are still deeply immersed in analyzing the bloodstain splatters from the scene. Tech specialists keep combing through electronic records. Meanwhile, the localized video dragnet just expanded to cover security feeds starting from January 24th, a full 7 days prior to her vanishing. Operating under the assumption that the attacker staked out the home several times before February 1st hit, the dedicated federal squad is actively keeping up the pressure. Former investigators closely watching the ongoing search are openly calling the momentum red hot in the media, a specific term implying they possess solid clues. The hunt is far from dead, and things are advancing behind the scenes despite those quiet media briefings. Taking a close look at the Fed's current tactical maneuvers reveals a whole lot regarding their new angle. Detectives went straight back to Nancy's street, heavily questioning individuals who do not reside there, focusing primarily on yard crews, builders, and handymen doing jobs around the Catalina foothills throughout the weeks and months leading up to February 1st. News Nation reporter Brian Enton confirmed that detectives are specifically touching on a resident who relocated right before Nancy vanished, along with a few nearby houses that were currently being built. Ex-FBI operative Steve Moore openly shared his thoughts on this new detail. He noted that detectives requesting the identities of the building crews really catches the eye, stressing that it certainly does not mean the case is losing ground. Rather, he believes it proves they are making real progress, showing that detectives are tracking the perpetrator's potential entry paths and alibis around the block while they were scoping things out. Someone living nearby also reported spotting a sketchy person hanging around NY's place in the weeks leading up to February 1st. This perfectly lines up with the early stalking timeline. Detectives are piecing together from the ground up. The Bureau's billboard push is currently live throughout 4 different states. Huge signs displaying NY's face alongside the federal hotline have gone up in towns spanning Arizona, Texas, New Mexico, and California. Former Bureau agent Jennifer Coffender called the push an honest attempt to spread the word. Yet she pointed out some doubts regarding how widely scattered these signs are. She felt this wide net indicates a lack of clear focus in their search strategy. She argued that pinpointing specific routes and towns tied to the team's working theories would pack much more of an investigative punch than just blanketing multiple states. The feds have kept quiet about their placement tactics. Meanwhile, the Pima County Board of Supervisors is slated to gather on March 24th, exactly 5 days from now, to officially go over Chris Nanos' work record. And that gathering is absolutely no accident. It comes right on the heels of the Arizona Republic's March 10th deep dive, which highlighted the holes in his official bio, the 26 complaints sitting in his internal affairs file, those 37 days of official suspensions, plus his choice to quit rather than get fired over in El Paso back in 1982. The committee doesn't actually have the power to just fire an elected sheriff on the spot. However, an official, open-air breakdown of his career history during a public session carries some serious political and institutional firepower. The push to oust him is still very much alive. Daniel Boutier and his grassroots team are pushing to hit that goal of 120,000 confirmed signatures within 120 days of March 12th to trigger a special election. He's framed the whole movement as a team effort across the aisle, with both Democrats and Republicans in Pima County pushing it forward together. Should they collect sufficient names, a snap election will kick off. Anyone meeting the requirements would be free to throw their hat in the ring. The highest vote getter takes the job. If Nanos takes the win, he keeps his badge, and nobody can try to oust him again this term without footing the entire bill for that previous vote. Former Bureau agent Maureen O'Connell, chatting on Brian Anton's News Nation broadcast this past March 18th, just 1 day prior to today, got asked point-blank if booting Nanos out of his position would mess up the current case. She gave a sharp response, simply saying, "Nope." She added that the case's momentum wouldn't suffer at all, mainly because Nanos isn't exactly the glue holding this entire operation together. That take is kind of a double-edged sword. On one hand, it shows the task force has built up enough steady steam that swapping bosses won't throw it off track. On the flip side, it implies the probe has been cruising along for a while now without his guidance driving the ship. And that's exactly the spot Nanos finds himself in right now, facing an active ouster, a committee hearing coming up in 5 days, plus a second completely unanimous vote of no confidence handed down by his own crew on March 13th. He's dealing with a $1.35 million legal claim hitting both him and his agency, alongside a nationwide media squad that just spent 7 weeks highlighting every single time his stories to different reporters didn't match up. He mentioned to Cole on March 17th that this ouster push is just the public exercising their rights. He swore he'd always respect whatever the voters decide. He called that the true beauty of democracy. Meanwhile, he told NBC Nightly News a week ago that detectives are pretty sure they understand the motive behind picking NY's house. He stated this was an intentional hit, not some random act. While he couldn't be 100% positive, he noted all the clues are leaning in that direction. Then he dropped the line that really hit home. Staring right down the camera lens, he gave this warning. Never assume for a second that just because this hit the Guthrie household, you're untouchable. Absolutely not. Always stay on your toes. Looking back at that comment, ex-Bureau agent Steve Moore shared a chilling thought that has hung over this whole mystery from day one. He pointed out that if cash wasn't the main driving force here, if a completely different reason pushed someone to snatch Nancy Guthrie out of her house at 2:28 in the morning, then that dark urge doesn't just vanish simply because they got away with it. It actually gets stronger. Anyone who pulls off a calculated strike on a defenseless person without facing any blowback just absorbed the most dangerous lesson possible for someone like that. They figured out they can pull it off a second time. As for Savannah Guthrie, she pulled out of her 2026 Winter Olympics hosting gig for NBC. She popped into Studio 1A over in New York for a quick, tearful visit and left her team with just 3 words. She told them she's still holding her ground. She admitted she hasn't given up on a good outcome yet, and that's the only real result we've seen after 47 days. No clear motives, no prime suspects, absolutely 0 people in handcuffs. Just a mom who's been gone for so long that piles of yellow daisies have started gathering on her front porch. We've got a sheriff staring down both a boot from office and a committee probe within days of each other. Plus a lab swab down in Florida holding what might be the final biological clue in this entire hunt, along with a massive federal strike team that insiders claim is running on all cylinders, constantly grinding, relentlessly pushing forward, and piecing together the hard evidence that neither hotlines nor cash payouts could dig up. Now, the lab work is all we really have left. High-tech family tree DNA matching has successfully tracked down perpetrators in mysteries way older and far more botched up than what we're looking at here. The feds expanding their search grid, grilling the building crews, checking that January 24th tape. That doesn't look like a dead-end probe hitting a brick wall. It points to detectives zeroing in on their target. 84-year-old Nancy Guthrie desperately relies on daily cardiac pills and her auditory devices. She has suffered without either of them for 47 consecutive days. If you've got Ring camera clips, vehicle dash cams, or basically any visual proof from around the Catalina foothills during the evening of January 31st, early morning, February 1st, January 11th, or the 24th, ring the Fed hotline at 1-800-CALL-FBI. Submit off-the-record hints to 88 Crime by dialing 5208-27463. Those facts remain entirely crucial, never losing value as time passes. A lone snapshot, a specific digital clock reading, one random car caught on unreviewed tape. Tiny details exactly like those are what ultimately crack major mysteries wide open. If my deep dive gave you fresh insights missing from mainstream media, pass this video around. Send it directly to anybody tracking this missing person mystery closely. Cranking up the public heat works exactly like this. It guarantees these files stay highly visible long after police briefings dry up and stop delivering solid updates. Smash that subscribe button to stick around for the big reveal, because my channel guarantees dropping those massive updates way before anyone else gets the chance. Sound off down in the comments, based on the official evidence. Why do you think detectives haven't locked anybody up after a full 47 straight days? Did the perpetrator completely outsmart everyone? Or did our justice network totally fail? Let me hear your theories down below. We haven't seen Nancy Guthrie in 47 agonizing days. This mystery hasn't frozen over. Forensics are still grinding away. And my channel isn't going off the grid anytime soon. The silence of 47 days. A call to vigilance. 47 days? For most of us, it's just a page turned on a calendar. But for Nancy Guthrie, it is a haunting void where a life once flourished. When an 4-year-old grandmother vanishes behind the silent click of an automated gate, leaving her life-saving heart medication and hearing aids behind. The silence speaks louder than any cry for help. This tragedy is a stark reminder that our greatest vulnerability often hides in plain sight. Tucked away in the quiet corners of our neighborhoods, we live in a world of advanced technology and thousands of leads, yet nothing can replace the power of human connection. Nancy's story isn't just a cold case. It is a plea for us to look closer, to care deeper, and to never let the elderly become invisible in their own homes. Let this be our lesson. Vigilance is the highest form of love. Check on your neighbors. Listen for the silence that feels too heavy. We must be the eyes and ears for those who can no longer protect themselves, because in the end, no one should ever be allowed to just disappear into the night. We owe it to Nancy, and we owe it to each other, to ensure that no home ever remains this quiet again.